Hello, and welcome to Plotfall. Tonight, our story takes us into the world of why you wouldn't survive a single day in the Mongol Empire. Before we begin, if you find value in these stories, perhaps take a quiet moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps others find the channel. You can also let me know in the comments where you're listening from and the time. It's always fascinating to see our quiet community grow around the world. Now, find a comfortable position. Perhaps dim the lights or turn on a soft fan for background noise, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Forget the gentle chime of your phone or the insistent beep of an alarm clock. Your first conscious sensation, as dawn hesitantly breaks across the immense, silent land, is the cold. It's a biting, persistent chill that seeps through the layers of rough-spun wool and stiff animal hides piled upon you, a cold that seems to emanate from the very earth itself. A constant reminder of the harshness of this world. The wind, a tireless traveler across the vast, open steppe, whistles a low, mournful song as it strains against the smoke-stained felt walls of your asterisk gur, the circular dwelling that is your only fragile shelter against the elements. This wind carries more than just the cold. It's a conduit for the raw sense of this untamed world. The air you draw into your lungs is thin, crisp, almost sharp. It's heavy with the earthy, musky aroma of horses, not just one or two, but the collective scent of a vast herd, their vitality a constant, thrumming undercurrent to life here. This is interwoven with the lingering, acrid tang of smoke from the central hearth, where embers likely still glow with a faint, dying warmth, a battle lost against the encroaching night. And beneath it all, there's something else, a scent that's profoundly wild, unfamiliar to your modern senses. Perhaps a little unsettling. It's the scent of untrodden earth, of distant, unseen animals, of a life lived perilously close to the bone. You'd instinctively pull your coverings tighter, the coarse texture of familiar friction against your skin. Peeking out, your eyes would struggle to adjust to the dim, gray light filtering through the smoke hole at the apex of the asterisk gur, illuminating swirling dust motes in the vague, huddled shapes of a life utterly, irrevocably alien to your own. As your vision clears, slowly, as if surfacing from a deep, unsettling dream, you'd push aside the heavy felt flap of the asterisk. The air that greets you is a shock, crisp, almost painfully pure, carrying the scent of damp earth and perhaps distant herds, a freshness your lungs have never truly known. Before you, the world unfurls in a way no city dweller, no dweller of structured landscapes, could truly comprehend. A vast, undulating ocean of grass stretches to every horizon, a living tapestry of muted greens and golds, under an impossibly wide, pale sky. There are no buildings breaking the skyline, no roads carving paths, no comforting, familiar lines of concrete or steel, no distant glimmer of electric light. Just the gentle curve of the earth, and, scattered sparsely like hardy mushrooms that have weathered countless storms, the low, rounded shapes of other gyres. Their felt sides, perhaps darkened by wood smoke and the harsh elements, blend seamlessly with the landscape. Thin, almost hesitant plumes of smoke might be seen rising from their central smoke holes, whispering into the enormous stillness of the morning air. Imagine the silence, broken only by the soft, pervasive rustle of that endless grass swaying in a breeze you can barely feel, or perhaps the distant, lonely whinny of a horse, a sound that seems to emphasize the sheer emptiness rather than fill it. It's a quiet so profound it might feel deafening at first, a stark, echoing absence of the constant, almost reassuring hum of modern life you've always taken for granted. You might instinctively scan for a landmark, a fixed point of reference in this rolling expanse, but find only the subtle variations in the land itself, the way the light falls across a distant swell of ground, the darker patches indicating richer soil, the direction the wind seems to sigh from. The sheer, unadulterated scale of it all would be humbling, perhaps even a little terrifying. Every single comfort, every convenience you've ever known feels not just miles, but an entire epoch away, replaced by this raw, magnificent, and utterly indifferent emptiness. And as your eyes struggle to make sense of this vastness, your ears would begin to tune into a different kind of world, a soundscape entirely of its own. Listen, very carefully, as the silence of the steppe gives way. Far off, yet seeming to emanate from all around, comes the sound of horses. Not just one or two, mind you, but a near-constant rolling chorus of countless neighs, soft whinnies, and the distant, rhythmic thud of hooves on the resilient earth. This isn't the occasional pleasant sound of a countryside ride. It's the very pulse of this empire, the ceaseless murmur of its power, its incredible mobility, its very lifeblood. Then, drifting closer on the breeze, you'd pick up the murmur of human voices. It's a language utterly alien to your ears, a cascade of unfamiliar consonants and vowels, flowing like a river whose currents you cannot read. It's not necessarily angry, not overtly threatening, but it's constant, the everyday chatter of a people whose world, whose very thoughts, are so profoundly different from your own. Imagine for a moment that feeling of profound isolation, unable to comprehend a single word, a single shouted instruction or whispered confidence, cut adrift in a sea of foreign sound. Woven into this complex tapestry of sound is the distinct, sharp crackle of fires. But these aren't the comforting, fragrant wood fires you might picture. More often than not, it's the surprisingly loud snap and pop of dried animal dung burning, argal, as it was known. The scent accompanying it is pungent, smoky, a practical aroma that speaks of resourcefulness, of survival stripped to its bare essentials, where nothing, absolutely nothing, is wasted. It's the sound and smell of warmth, of a cooked meal, however meager, in a land that offers few easy comforts. This symphony is not the gentle, predictable hum of your modern world, not the distant drone of traffic, or the quiet sigh of your heating. This is a symphony of survival, an intricate orchestra of necessity. Each distant neigh, each unintelligible word, each crackle of a dung fire, tells a story of endurance, of a life lived perpetually on the edge. A world where even the air itself seems to carry the weight of a different, harsher, and altogether more immediate reality. As you adjust to this ancient soundscape, your eyes begin to pick out the figures moving within it, the architects of this harsh symphony of survival. Imagine for a moment, standing amongst them, you see faces first, etched by relentless wind and searing sun, leathered and creased like old maps charting vast, unforgiving landscapes. Each line, each shadow, tells a silent story of long, arduous rides and nights spent under a blanket of indifferent stars. Their eyes, often narrowed against an unseen glare or the sting of airborne dust, meet yours, and in them you register a deep, unsettling stillness. There's no immediate, open hostility, not necessarily, but a profound, assessing wariness that prickles at your skin. They are wrapped in layers of thick, felted wool and furs. Perhaps the dark sheen of sable, the rougher texture of wolf, or the reddish hue of fox. Practical against the biting cold, certainly, but also a clear, unspoken statement of their world, their hard-won identity. The faint, acrid scent of wood smoke, a constant companion in their lives, clings to their heavy garments, mingling with a sharper, more animal tang of dried leather, and the ever-present musk of horse. You realize, with a quiet, sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach, that every element of your own appearance, from your soft, unfamiliar clothes to the hesitant way you stand, the very cadence of your breath, marks you as utterly, irrevocably alien. You are a disruption in their well-worn pattern, an uninvited guest whose arrival at this very exclusive, very serious gathering is noted by every silent, watchful pair of eyes. The weight of those stares, unwavering and unreadable, finally prompts you to look away, to seek some solace in the wider world around you. Your gaze drifts past the assembled figures, past the sturdy girs, towards the vast open steppe that stretches in every direction. It's an endless, undulating canvas painted in muted browns and greens beneath an enormous silent sky, a sky perhaps punctuated only by the distant, lonely cry of a hawk or the constant, sifting whisper of the wind through the coarse grasses at your feet. You scan this immense horizon, searching with a hopeful, then fading, flicker in your heart for any familiar landmark. A distinctive peak, a particular bend in a non-existent river, anything that might anchor you. There are no roads here, not as you conceive of them. No neatly laid paths or signposts offering gentle guidance. No comforting lines etched onto a map you might possess. The Mongols move by an ancient, ingrained knowledge of the land, by the subtle language of the stars, the wind, and the shifting seasons, leaving behind only faint trails that would be utterly invisible to your untrained eyes. A quiet understanding, cold and sharp as the steppe wind itself, begins to settle in your mind. There's no turning back, no simple retracing of steps to an unseen point of entry into this overwhelming world. The concept of home, as a place you can just return to, feels suddenly, painfully distant, like a half-forgotten dream from another lifetime. This isn't a temporary misplacement, a brief detour from which you'll soon be rescued. This realization settles not with a dramatic crash, but with a slow, chilling seep, like icy water gradually filling your boots. This you understand with a quiet, sinking dread. Is it your new and, in all likelihood, profoundly brief reality, unfolding under the watchful gaze of a people who are as much a part of this landscape as the hardy grasses and the biting wind? And you are a fragile, unrooted thing, utterly at their mercy, and the mercy of this immense, indifferent land. Perhaps out of a weary sort of curiosity, or maybe just a basic human need to escape the relentless wind, you are gestured towards one of the round, felt-covered dwellings. Hesitantly, you duck through the low, often decorated wooden doorway of a gur. The immediate sensation is a wave of surprising warmth, a welcome, almost shocking reprieve from the step's bitter bite. It emanates from a central hearth, where a dung-fueled fire smolders, casting flickering, dancing shadows on the intricate lattice walls, covered by thick layers of felt. But with the warmth comes the smoke. It hangs heavy in the air, a constant, acrid presence, mingling with the earthy scent of dried animal hides, lanolin from wool, and perhaps the faint, milky aroma of arag, fermented mare's milk. It stings your unaccustomed eyes, catches in your throat, a perfume of daily life you realize people here simply breathe without a second thought. The light is dim, filtering poorly through the smoke and the single opening at the crown of the gur, the tuno, often covered with a flap of felt. Your eyes struggle to adjust, picking out shapes in the gloom. Low-slung, painted wooden chests, piles of furs that serve as both bedding and insulation, and the indistinct forms of other occupants moving with a quiet familiarity. There are no walls inside, no separate rooms to retreat to. Life here is lived openly, communally, within this single circular space. The concept of personal space as you understand it, the luxury of a closed door, seems to have evaporated, along with your hopes of a quick return home. Every cough, every hushed conversation, every rustle of movement is shared. It's a cozy, protective bubble against the vast, indifferent emptiness outside. Yet, for you, accustomed to the quiet solitude of your own partitioned rooms, it feels utterly, profoundly exposed. A different kind of chill, this one internal, begins to settle. A quiet understanding of how different this world truly is. That internal chill, that sense of profound otherness you felt within the gur, is soon joined by a far more immediate, physical shock. The steppe climate you see is a master of brutal, almost theatrical extremes, and your body, so accustomed to the gentle hum of thermostats and the predictability of central heating, is a bewildered, unprepared newcomer. Imagine the summer day unfolding. The sun, a relentless, molten coin burning in an endless, pale blue sky, bakes the vast rolling plains until the very air above the parched earth shimmers with mirages. Fine, gritty dust, kicked up by the slightest breeze or movement, coats everything, settling on your skin, already slick with a film of constant, uncomfortable sweat. There is no real escape, no deep, cool shadow to offer genuine respite, just the oppressive, tangible weight of the heat, pressing down, draining your energy, making each breath feel thick and dry. Then, as that same sun finally bleeds across the immense horizon, painting the western sky in fleeting, fiery hues of orange and purple, the temperature plummets with an almost vindictive speed. The stored warmth of the day is stolen away from the land, and from you, replaced by a biting, deeply penetrating cold that seems to seep directly into your bones. The thin, woolen felt of the gur, so surprisingly effective against the scouring winds, offers precious little insulation against this sudden, profound freeze. You'd huddle under rough, heavy animal hides, their smell earthy and perhaps a little rank, their texture coarse against your skin, but the insidious cold still finds every tiny gap, every chink in your makeshift defenses. Above, the stars, diamond-sharp and impossibly numerous in the ink-black, unpolluted sky, might seem beautiful for a moment, before they begin to feel like distant, icy eyes, mocking your shivering form. One single rotation of the Earth, from scorching desert heat to near Arctic chill, your entire system, wholly unacclimatized, simply screams in silent protest. As the sun, even if it decides to make a proper appearance, does little to truly banish the deep chill that has settled into your very marrow, another, more fundamental need begins to whisper, then insist: thirst. But here, in this sprawling empire of grass and wind, there are no shining taps, no effortless gush of cool, clean water at the simple turn of a wrist. Every single drop is a tiny, precious jewel, often earned with considerable effort. Perhaps you'd find yourself joining a slow procession, hefting a heavy, rough-spun clay pot or a stiffened, somewhat smelly animal skin towards a distant, perhaps muddy, stream or well. The water itself, when you finally get it, might be cloudy, tasting faintly of earth, of minerals, and perhaps carrying the scent of the livestock that also depend upon it. You would learn, with a swiftness born of necessity, to be incredibly sparing, to make each mouthful count. And then, of course, there's the other call of nature. No gleaming porcelain thrones await your convenience, no discreet flushing mechanisms to whisk away the evidence of human biology. It's a far more elemental arrangement, a designated patch of earth, often some distance from the gers to maintain a semblance of hygiene, or perhaps a simple dug pit, exposed to the biting wind and the indifferent sky. The concept of privacy, as you understand it, has largely dissolved into the vast landscape, as insignificant as a single blade of grass under that enormous sky. As dusk inevitably bleeds across the horizon, bringing with it that familiar, unwelcome embrace of cold, there's no switch to illuminate your world. The darkness that descends is profound, a thick, almost tangible blanket, broken only by the flickering, hungry light of a fire fueled by dried dung, its scent pungent and smoky, or perhaps the weak sputtering glow of a tallow lamp. This meager light casts long, dancing, often unsettling shadows that writhe on the felt walls of your temporary home. Every simple task, from preparing a meager, gritty meal to mending a tear in your rough clothing, is transformed into a laborious undertaking, performed in this dim, uncertain, and often smoky illumination. The sheer, unceasing physical effort of it all, simply to exist, would be a silent, crushing weight on your spirit. And then, imagine you push aside the heavy felt flap of your gur, stepping out from that smoky dimness into the light of day. Your eyes would strain, adjusting not just to the brightness, but to the sheer, overwhelming scale of the world outside. Before you, an ocean of grass, rippling under a sky so vast it feels like a physical weight. The horizon stretches in every direction, a seemingly endless, unbroken line, where the pale earth meets the even paler sky. There are no friendly trees to offer shade, no gentle hills to break the monotony, just this immense, featureless plain. You might feel a breeze, sometimes gentle, sometimes a relentless, whining force that seems to scour the land clean, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and distant, unknown things. This openness offers no comfort, no place to hide. A storm brewing on the horizon would be visible for hours, a dark smudge growing inevitably larger, and there's nowhere to run, nowhere to shelter, except back in that fragile felt tent. And enemies? They too could see you from miles away, a tiny, vulnerable speck on this enormous canvas. This profound exposure fosters a deep, gnawing sense of isolation. You are a solitary figure in a landscape that seems utterly indifferent to your existence. The silence, when the wind drops, isn't peaceful. It's a watchful, waiting silence that magnifies every tiny sound, every beat of your own uneasy heart. It's a vulnerability that seeps into your bones, a constant, quiet hum beneath the surface of your thoughts, reminding you just how small, and how alone, you truly are out here. That gnawing vulnerability is amplified by another, equally unsettling truth. Nothing here is truly permanent. Just as you might begin to feel a flicker of familiarity with the curve of a nearby hill, or the way the morning light strikes your gur, the entire world around you could be uprooted. There are no deep-rooted villages here, no ancient stone walls offering a sense of enduring sanctuary. Your home, your entire community, is a temporary constellation of felt and wood, a portable island in the vast grassy ocean, ready to be dismantled at a moment's notice. Imagine waking not to the comforting, predictable sounds of a settled life, but to the low murmur of impending departure, a subtle shift in the camp's usual rhythm. The air, thick with the scent of livestock and the lingering wood smoke from last night's dung fires, now carries a new tension, a quiet urgency. You'd be part of this immense, yet surprisingly swift, disassembly. Hands would grow sore from lashing down possessions, backs would ache from loading heavy felt walls and wooden frames onto groaning ox carts, the relentless sun or biting wind your constant companion. This ceaseless movement isn't arbitrary. Perhaps the vast herds, the sheep, goats, and horses that are the very lifeblood of your people, have grazed these lands bare, their 1,000 hooves turning verdant pasture into barren dust. Or maybe a command has rippled down from a distant Noyan, a strategic shift in the grand, sprawling game of empire. Whatever the reason, your tired body must simply obey, adapt, and endure. This isn't a single grand adventure. It's a relentless cycle of arrival, a brief, tenuous settlement, and then, once more, departure. Each move demands a fresh reserve of energy you might not feel you possess, a quiet surrender to the endless horizon. As dawn tentatively paints the vast cold sky with hues of pale gray and reluctant rose, your eyes flicker open within the felt walls of the gur. The air inside still carries the faint, smoky scent of last night's dung fire, a surprisingly earthy aroma that clings to your clothes and hair, a constant reminder of this nomadic life. But comfort is fleeting, for the day demands its due, beginning with a morning meal unlike any you've ever known. There's no gentle easing into wakefulness here, no warm, sweet coffee or delicate, flaky pastry awaiting your pleasure. Instead, you'll likely be handed a wooden bowl, perhaps still cool from the night air, containing *arag, fermented mare's milk. Imagine a drink that is both ancient tradition and a potent jolt to your unaccustomed system. It's often thin, almost watery, yet surprisingly strong, with a pronounced sourness that bites at the back of your throat and a distinct, almost yeasty tang. Tiny bubbles, a natural result of its lively fermentation, might even fizz gently against your lips. It's an acquired taste, to put it mildly, a taste born of necessity in a land where other dairy spoils quickly. For the Mongols, it's a vital source of vitamins, a daily ritual. Alongside this liquid challenge, you might find some strips of beef or mutton, dried hard as weathered wood until they're nearly black. These are preserved by the relentless wind and sun, made to last for months, even years. You'll gnaw on a piece, your jaw working diligently, patiently, to soften its leathery resolve, the intensely salty, undeniably gamey flavor slowly, grudgingly releasing. Or perhaps today, it's a simple, unadorned scoop of boiled millet, a humble, slightly gritty porridge that offers bland but reliable sustenance. This isn't breakfast as an indulgence, a moment of quiet joy. It's fuel, stark and efficient, for another day of relentless existence under the enormous, indifferent sky. A profound lesson in how little one truly needs, and how much one can endure. With that meager sustenance settled, your thoughts, or rather, your body's urgent demands, would inevitably turn to water. Not the clear, cool rush from a tap you might idly imagine, but a far more precious, and often painfully elusive, commodity. Finding it is the first monumental task of your day. Perhaps it's a distant, slow-moving river, its banks softened to mud by the passage of countless herds, or a hidden spring, a mere trickle amongst the rocks, jealously guarded by the landscape itself. You might spend hours, a significant, sun-scorched portion of your day, just reaching it and then fetching it, hauling a heavy, unwieldy animal skin bag filled with the sloshing, lukewarm liquid back to camp, each step an effort under the vast, indifferent sky. And once you possess it, this water, often still carrying the scent of the earth or the faint taste of the wild, is governed by rules as unyielding as iron. The Mongols held water sacred, a reverence deeply woven into their nomadic spirit, born from the harsh, unforgiving realities of the steppe. You wouldn't dare consider bathing directly in a river or lake, the soap of your distant future an unimaginable luxury. Nor would you wash your clothes directly in its flow, letting grime cloud its purity. Such an act wasn't merely unhygienic by their standards. It was a profound spiritual offense, an insult to the powerful spirits of the sky and water, believed to invite drought, disease, or other calamities upon the entire group. Even relieving yourself anywhere near a water source was an absolute taboo. Every single drop was to be used with meticulous care, ladled carefully, ensuring not a fleck of dirt, not one careless splash, contaminated the communal supply or disturbed its sanctity. A simple, unthinking act could have dire consequences. It makes you pause, doesn't it, to consider the profound weight of a single cup, when its purity holds the well-being of all. That same reverence for the essentials extended, naturally, to what sustained them on those vast, open plains. Forget the crisp salads, the vibrant curries, or the comforting sweetness of baked bread you might crave. Here, the menu was a far more primal affair, a testament to survival in a harsh, windswept land. Imagine the constant, pervasive smell of simmering meat, perhaps a hint of wood smoke if you were lucky, a scent that clung to the felt of the cloggers, to your woolen clothes, to the very air you breathed. Day in, day out, the mainstays were mutton, goat, and yes, horse. These would often be simply boiled in a great communal pot, the water itself becoming a rich, fatty broth, skimmed off and drunk with a kind of solemn gusto. Every calorie precious. For the long campaigns, or to see them through the brutal winters, meat was sliced into thin strips and dried under the relentless sun and biting wind, becoming tough, chewy borts. This was a kind of primordial jerky, something you'd gnaw on for sustenance as you rode across the endless steppe. There was a certain brutal honesty to it, this diet. No delicate spices to mask the strong, often intensely gamey flavors. No tender vegetables or sweet fruits to offer a colorful counterpoint. Just meat, and more meat, with perhaps some foraged wild onions or roots if the season and location permitted. For a modern palate, accustomed to such incredible variety, to the subtle dance of sweet and sour, of crisp and soft, this unyielding repetition would be a profound shock. Your stomach perhaps might stage a rather vocal rebellion against the onslaught of rich animal fats and the sheer, unwavering protein. The flavors, so alien, so intensely animal, would linger, a constant, greasy reminder of a life stripped to its bare, resilient core. But what happened when even that resilient core, the herds of livestock, began to falter? When the relentless hunt yielded nothing but cold wind and aching limbs? Then, the vast, often barren steppe offered its meager alternatives. Imagine yourself, wrapped in stiff felt and worn leather, scanning the unforgiving earth. Your eyes, already tired from the endless horizon, would search for the slightest hint of green, for the tough, stringy grasses or the bitter roots that clung to life beneath the parched soil. The wind, a constant companion, would whisper tales of emptiness, carrying the faint earthy scent of dust and perhaps, if you were truly unfortunate, the distant tang of snow on the air, even out of season. Your fingers, raw from the cold or cracked from the sun, would dig into the unyielding ground, prying loose a handful of unappetizing tubers or a few coarse leaves. These weren't the tender vegetables of a settled life. These were survival rations, often gritty with dirt, their taste a dull, earthy bitterness that did little to satisfy the hollow ache in your belly. A successful day of foraging might mean a small pot of something vaguely plant-like, boiled with precious water, offering just enough substance to keep the sharpest pangs of hunger at bay for a few more hours. But often it would be far less. The gnawing emptiness would remain, a constant unwelcome guest, a quiet reminder of how close to the edge life truly was. Perhaps, after such a meager day, you are beckoned towards the smoky warmth of a *gur, the circular felt tent of a nomadic family. If you are offered food, it will not be on delicate porcelain. Instead, a simple wooden bowl, an *aya, is pressed into your hands. It's likely well worn, perhaps a little greasy from countless stews of mutton and wild onion, its surface smoothed by generations of use, still holding the faint, lingering scent of meals past. The air inside is thick, a heady mix of wood smoke, boiled meat, lanolin from the felt walls, and the sharp, tangy aroma of *arag, the fermented mare's milk that is a staple and a symbol of hospitality. You would likely eat from a common pot, dipping your wooden bowl in, or perhaps receiving a direct share of roasted meat, torn by hand. Everyone eats together, a close, communal affair. But this intimacy is fraught with unspoken rules. Do you know to accept your bowl with your right hand, or with both, never just the left? Would you understand that even a small offering of food, especially the choicest fatty bits, must be accepted with apparent gratitude, lest you deeply offend your host? A misstep, pointing your personal knife towards the sacred fire, stepping on the threshold of the asterisk as you entered, or even a misplaced glance, isn't just a social blunder. In this fiercely proud and spiritually attuned culture, it could be interpreted as a grave insult, a deliberate provocation. That simple wooden bowl, cradled in your uncertain hands, suddenly feels like a test, its contents a judgment. But even if you somehow manage to navigate these intricate social rituals, memorizing every gesture and every taboo, a far more fundamental problem looms, a chasm you cannot easily cross. You have no clan, no family. In this world, woven from the toughest threads of blood loyalty and intricate kinship networks stretching back generations, you are a ghost, a whisper without an echo. Imagine standing on the vast windswept steppe, the endless blue sky arching above like an indifferent god, and realizing that not a single soul among the smoky felt chair dotting the landscape owes you anything. No brother to stand with you in a sudden dispute, his hand instinctively going to his knife. No uncle to vouch for your character with a gruff nod. No cousin to share a meager, precious portion of dried curd or a sip of arag. Every hardened gaze that falls upon you, from beneath the fur-lined rim of a hat, is not one of simple curiosity, but of deep, ingrained suspicion. Who are you? From what distant, unknown land do you hail? Whose protection do you claim under this vast, unforgiving sky? These are not idle questions. They are the very bedrock of identity, of belonging, of safety. Without a clan, you are less than nothing. A potential spy, a wandering spirit with no anchor, perhaps even a bad omen. Your pleas for shelter might be met with the iciest silence. Your requests for food with a dismissive wave of a calloused hand. The flickering warmth of the communal fire, the shared, hearty laughter over a bubbling pot of stew. These are privileges reserved for those within the sacred circle of trust. You, dear listener, are irrevocably outside, shivering in a wind that seems to carry only their distrust. And in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Mongol Empire, being an outsider was often a slow death sentence, delivered not by a swift blade, but by relentless, crushing indifference. Beyond the physical cold, a deeper chill settles in your bones, the chill of utter incomprehension. The voices around you, when they do speak in your direction, are a torrent of guttural sounds, clicks, and lilting cadences that mean absolutely nothing to you. It's not just that you don't understand the words, you don't understand the intent, the nuance, the subtle shifts in tone that could mean the difference between a shared joke and a deadly insult. Imagine, for a moment, trying to convey your parched, your throat a dry, rasping cavern, the dust of the steppe coating your tongue. Your frantic gestures towards your mouth, towards a water skin hanging tantalizingly close, are met with blank stares, or worse, suspicion. Are you politely asking for a drink, or are you eyeing that precious resource with an intent to steal? Their eyes narrow, their hands might instinctively move towards a knife hilt, and a simple misunderstanding could be your last. Every simple, desperate need, a sip of water, a crust of hard bread, a moment's respite from a forced march, even an urgent need to relieve yourself, becomes an impossible negotiation, a humiliating pantomime of desperation. Your own words, the familiar, comforting sounds of your native tongue, die in your throat, useless and alien in this new, harsh reality. Fear isn't just a fleeting shadow here. It's a constant, gnawing companion, fed by the vast, echoing silence that yawns between your understanding and theirs. You become a ghost in their vibrant, brutal world, physically present but unseen, heard but utterly misunderstood. How long, you might wonder, before that suffocating silence erodes your very sense of self, your will to even try to bridge that unbridgeable gap? That sense of utter powerlessness, of being adrift without anchor, only deepens as you begin to perceive the unyielding structure of their world. It isn't merely the words you cannot grasp. It's an invisible yet ironclad pyramid of command that governs every breath, every interaction. At its very pinnacle, almost a deity in human form, sits the great Khan, his authority absolute, his decrees shaping the lives of millions across vast, windswept territories. His word isn't just law, it's the very current that animates the empire, a force as tangible as the biting wind. This power flows downwards, a formidable cascade through noyans, the princes and commanders, then to lesser officers, and on, until it reaches even the lowest-ranking soldier, each one a vital, unquestioning link. Each individual is a cog in this immense machine of obedience, a machine forged in loyalty, and the ever-present threat of swift, uncompromising justice under the Yasa, their great legal code. And where do you fit into this grand, unyielding design? You don't. You are outside it, beneath it, a loose stone on the path, easily kicked aside. Imagine for a moment, standing before even a minor Mongol official. His richly embroidered robes, perhaps smelling faintly of horse, smoke, and dried milk, are a clear marker of his station, a visual reminder of your nothingness. His gaze, accustomed to instant deference, might slide over you as if you are less than the trampled grass beneath his sturdy felt boots. The air around him hums with an unspoken authority, an expectation of submission so profound it's almost a physical pressure you can feel against your skin. Respect for superiors here isn't a suggestion. It's the bedrock of existence, the silent law that underpins all others. A sideways glance interpreted as insolent, a muttered word overheard, an unthinking gesture deemed disrespectful towards anyone above you. And in this world, almost everyone is above you, could invite a swift, brutal, and utterly final response. There are no appeals, no sympathetic hearings, no mitigating circumstances for the truly insignificant, for the uninvited shadow lingering at the edge of their formidable world. And yet, amidst this rigid world, tales abound of Mongol generosity, of asterisk yurts thrown open to weary travelers, of shared kumis and roasted mutton offered freely. The legendary hospitality of the steppes is a recurring theme in the accounts of those who journeyed among them and lived to tell the tale. But you, a stranger appearing from nowhere with no introduction, no clear tribute or purpose etched upon your weary face, you are not yet a guest. You are an anomaly. Instead, you are a puzzle, and in this keenly guarded empire, every puzzle piece is first suspected of not fitting, of belonging to a different, hostile game. Imagine the eyes that follow your every movement, not with the open curiosity of a child, but with the calculating stillness of a hunter assessing unfamiliar spoor. The silence that greets you isn't peaceful. It's an assessment, heavy and unyielding. Hear the murmur of their language, a river of sound you cannot navigate, each syllable a potential judgment. In a land carved by conquest and held by constant, vigilant readiness, an unknown element is an unacceptable risk. Every unfamiliar shadow stretching long in the afternoon sun could hide a spy, every unknown face a scout for an unseen enemy, a harbinger of troubles they've worked so fiercely to quell. Their questions, should they deign to speak them, would be few, sharp as a freshly honed blade, and brutally direct, each word a probe into your very being. The vast, open steppe, usually a symbol of freedom, would suddenly feel like a very small, exposed stage under a harsh, unblinking spotlight. Kindness might indeed exist, somewhere beyond this formidable wall of ingrained caution, but first you would need to prove, somehow, that you are not a danger, not a disruption to their hard-won, fiercely protected order. And that, lost and alone, is a task of almost unimaginable difficulty. Yet, should you somehow navigate that initial, terrifying scrutiny, you might find yourself observing a different facet of this resilient society, one managed with a quiet, steely competence. Here, in the heart of the asterisk Gur, the round felt home, or out amidst the vast, bleating herds. Mongol women held sway. They were the anchors of the nomadic household, their days a relentless cycle of milking yaks and mares, churning butter until their arms ached, preparing meals from scarce ingredients, and expertly packing an entire household onto camels when the grasslands demanded a move. Their hands, calloused and capable, mended felt, tended children, and often managed significant wealth in the form of livestock. The air around their domain would be thick with the smells of wood smoke, dried dung fuel, and perhaps the tangy aroma of fermenting mare's milk. Arag. These women were far from silent, subservient figures. History tells us of formidable queens and regents, women who advised khans and held the empire together during turbulent successions. Their influence, though perhaps not always overt on the battlefield, was woven deeply into the fabric of Mongol life, as essential as the sturdy felt walls of their homes, sheltering them from the biting steppe winds. You might even find a sharp intelligence in their eyes, a pragmatic understanding of the world that mirrored the warrior's own. Their voices, when raised, carrying a surprising authority that could quiet a boisterous tent. But don't mistake this respect for a modern sense of freedom. Their lives, though filled with undeniable authority in their domain, were rigidly framed by tradition. Marriages were often arranged, their primary duties to family and clan were absolute, and their sphere, however vital, was still distinct from that of the men who rode out to conquer. The weight of these expectations, the unyielding rhythm of survival and duty, would likely feel as heavy and unfamiliar as the thickest felt robe on a summer's day. Their strength was undeniable, but it was a strength forged and bound by the unyielding demands of their world. A world where a woman's resilience was simply a prerequisite for the clan's survival. Beyond the rhythm of daily duties and the weight of familial expectations, an even more pervasive framework governed every soul within the khan's domain. You might only hear of it in hushed tones, a murmur carried on the wind alongside the scent of wood smoke and distant herds, the great yasa. This was Genghis Khan's law, not initially carved on stone tablets for all to scrutinize, but imprinted on the collective consciousness of the empire, its tenets as unyielding as the frozen earth in deepest winter. It was a code that touched everything, from the grand strategies of war to the most personal of disputes. A silent current running beneath the thundering hooves in the vast open sky. Imagine, for a moment, the constant, quiet hum of that awareness. Every action, every word, every seemingly private decision was measured against this invisible, yet omnipresent standard. A careless word whispered about a superior, an act of theft no matter how small, even polluting a stream. Infractions that might earn a reprimand elsewhere could, under the yasa, invoke a response that was terrifyingly swift and utterly final. There were no grand courtrooms as you might picture them, no lengthy debates or impassioned pleas for mercy that might sway a judge. Justice, Mongol style, was as sharp and immediate as a hunter's arrow finding its mark. The list of capital offenses was chillingly extensive, encompassing acts that today might seem minor, a stark reminder that survival in this empire meant not just enduring the harsh landscape, but navigating a legal terrain where a single misstep could be your very last. This ever-present threat, the knowledge that the yasa's judgment was both severe and inescapable, must have woven a thread of constant, wearying caution through the very fabric of everyday life, a subtle tension beneath the surface of even the most mundane routines. This constant, wearying caution shaped every interaction, every glance exchanged in the smoky air of the yurts or the wind-swept expanse of the plains. Imagine for a moment you are navigating a bustling encampment, the usual sounds of life, children's distant laughter, the rhythmic thud of a mallet on leather, forming a familiar backdrop. Suddenly, a different kind of commotion erupts, sharp and cold. You might see a figure, perhaps a trader known for his boisterous calls, now ashen-faced and silent as he's swiftly apprehended by stern-faced warriors. His crime? It could be an accusation of theft, a single word of disrespect uttered against a chieftain, or even a dispute escalated too far. There would be no lengthy deliberations, no panel of robed adjudicators pondering the nuances. Justice was a swift, brutal theater, often played out in the very dust of the camp for all to see. A stolen water skin, a moment of perceived insolence, an illicit glance towards another's spouse. These weren't mere social faux pas. to be smoothed over with an apology. They were potential death sentences. You might witness a thief, their desperate pleas swallowed by the indifferent air, subjected to a brutal beating right there in the dirt, the sickening thuds a stark lesson for onlookers. Or worse, dragged off, vanishing into the grim machinery of Mongol justice, their fate becoming a whispered, cautionary tale among the tents. Enslavement was another common currency for transgression, a life suddenly stripped of all autonomy, reduced to mere property. Even failing to dismount in the presence of a noble, or inadvertently stepping on the threshold of their gur, could be interpreted as a grave affront, inviting swift and severe retribution. The line between life and a brutal, summary end was perilously thin, a tightrope walked daily over a chasm of harsh, immediate consequence. Beyond these more obvious perils, the ones announced with a shout or the glint of steel, lay a far more pervasive, almost invisible web of potential missteps. Imagine yourself, a newcomer, treading softly through a Mongol camp. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, dried dung fires, and roasting meat, a scent both alien and strangely comforting, perhaps the aroma of boiled mutton hanging heavy. But beneath this surface, every gesture you make, every glance, every casual act could be scrutinized against a vast, unwritten codex of customs and beliefs. You see, your ignorance would be no shield, no gentle excuse whispered in your defense. Spilling a cup of kumis, the fermented mare's milk so central to their culture, might not just be clumsy. It could be seen as a profound insult, a waste of sacred sustenance. Perhaps you point your eating knife, not even a weapon, towards the hearth fire, a place of spiritual significance, an act of deep disrespect you'd never even consider. Or maybe, seeking a private moment away from the felt walls of the gur, you inadvertently relieve yourself too close to a stream, unaware that defiling revered water sources was often punishable by immediate, unceremonious death. There was no helpful pamphlet handed out at the edge of the steppe, no friendly orientation session explaining the myriad ways to give grave offense. Each day would become a silent, unknowing gamble, a smile misinterpreted as a smirk, a shadow cast at the wrong moment over something sacred, an object handled in a way deemed impure. The sudden, uncomfortable hush in a previously bustling tent, the narrowed, unblinking eyes of a warrior you'd never noticed before. These subtle shifts in atmosphere could be the only warnings you'd receive, and the consequences, as we've seen, were rarely a gentle reprimand. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? To navigate a world where your very survival depends on rules you don't even know exist, where a polite gesture from your own world could swiftly become a death warrant in theirs. And when those invisible lines were crossed, or when simple, earthy disagreements over livestock or territory inevitably arose, how was order maintained? Forget any notion of a formal legal system, with its comforting rituals of evidence and appeal. The very air around a dispute would feel different, charged, and immediate. Imagine, if you will, being brought before a council of elders. Their faces, weathered like ancient leather, hold the wisdom of generations, their eyes reflecting the vast, empty landscapes. They sit, perhaps on thick felt rugs inside a smoky gur, the scent of burning dung and sour mare's milk heavy in the air. Their voices, low and rumbling, would weave a verdict in a language that sounds to your ears like the wind whistling through dry grass. Utterly alien, yet holding the power of your immediate future. Or perhaps your fate would rest with a local chieftain, Noyan, whose word was as unbending as the iron in his weapons. In his presence, surrounded by his retainers, the silence would be thick, broken only by the crackle of a fire or the distant neighing of a horse. His judgment, swift and absolute, would leave no room for argument. And sometimes, when conciliation failed and honor demanded it, resolution might be far more direct, a brutal dance of flashing blades under that immense, indifferent sky. Justice here was not a complex tapestry of laws, but a raw, immediate force, as unforgiving as the steppe itself. This sense of immediate, unyielding consequence wasn't confined to grand disputes or the chieftain's court. It seeped into the very fabric of your days, a quiet hum beneath the thud of hooves and the murmur of the camp, a constant, subtle pressure you learned to navigate like an unseen current. Imagine, for a moment, the weight of that understanding as you moved through your day. A careless word, perhaps spoken in jest but overheard by the wrong ears, or a momentary lapse in the intricate etiquette demanded by the hierarchy. These weren't just minor faux pas. They could invite a scrutiny that felt as cold and sharp as the steppe wind, a scrutiny that carried the very real threat of swift, uncompromising punishment. You'd learn to cultivate an almost preternatural awareness, your senses tuned to the subtle shifts in mood, the unspoken rules that governed every interaction. The silence that often fell in the presence of authority wasn't merely respectful. It was thick with unspoken calculations, with the knowledge that a misstep could unravel a life. This pervasive tension, this undercurrent of fear, was a powerful tool for maintaining order across vast, often unruly territories. The Great Yasa, the unwritten but rigidly enforced law of the Mongols, promised severe retribution, and that promise was rarely broken. It was a social glue of sorts, but one mixed with more than a little dread, binding society through a shared understanding of consequence rather than shared comfort. And who upheld this stark order, this empire built on such unyielding foundations? Perhaps you can see them now, emerging from the dust of the vast, wind-swept steppe. The Mongol warrior. Not a soldier in the way we might imagine, with brightly polished parade armor, but something altogether more elemental, more attuned to the harshness of the land itself. Forget shining breastplates. Think instead of toughened leather, boiled and shaped, or perhaps layers of silk, surprisingly effective against arrows. Their faces, weathered like old leather by sun and biting wind, would hold a stillness that could be unsettling. Their eyes, accustomed to scanning immense horizons for the slightest flicker of movement, would miss very little. From the moment they could walk, sometimes even before, life was a relentless training ground. A tiny hand, barely able to form a fist, would be guided to a bow. Small legs, still wobbly, would learn the rhythm of a pony's gait, becoming one with the animal almost before they mastered their own language. You might try to picture it. The constant chafe of coarse wool against skin, the ever-present scent of horse and worn leather, the sun blazing down in summer, or the ice-sharp wind cutting at your cheeks in winter, day after unforgiving day. Archery wasn't merely a pastime. It was as vital as breathing. Horsemanship wasn't just a skill. It was an extension of their very being. Their world often revolved around the nunarj, the great communal hunt, which served as much as a colossal military exercise as it did a source of food, honing tactics, coordination, and an unshakable discipline. Every able-bodied man was a soldier, always prepared. Their movements would be economical, purposeful, stripped of all unnecessary flourish by a life where softness could indeed be a fatal flaw. The demands of constant readiness, of endless campaigns across unforgiving landscapes, were etched into their very posture, their gaze. There was little room for much else, was there, when your entire existence was geared towards the next horizon, the next conquest? That ceaseless drive towards the next horizon, the relentless pursuit of conquest, wasn't merely a pastime for the Khans. It became the very pulse of the empire. Imagine an immense organism, always hungry, always moving. The Mongol Empire existed in a near-perpetual state of either expanding its vast borders or fiercely defending what it had already claimed. This wasn't a realm of peaceful, settled abundance for most within its reach. It was a society mobilized, almost breathing, for war. Consider what that reality entailed. Every sinew of its collective existence, every significant resource, every able body, was ultimately channeled towards this colossal, unceasing effort. The finest horses, sleek and powerful, were destined for the thundering cavalry, not for a gentle amble across the steppe for personal leisure. The strongest metals, once wrested from the earth, were more likely to be forged into gleaming arrowheads and sharp swords than into plowshares or sturdy cooking pots for a family hearth. Grain, livestock, textiles, all were subject to the insatiable demands of the military machine. Skills of a craftsman, knowledge of animal husbandry, even the simple ability to carry a heavy load, all could be requisitioned without a moment's notice, diverted from personal use to serve the greater, martial purpose. It meant that ordinary life, as one might picture it, often existed in the shadow of the army's immense needs, always secondary. There was little buffer, little deep-seated certainty for many. The choicest cuts of meat, the warmest furs, the sturdiest yurts, these would naturally flow towards those who fought, and those who directly sustained the fight. For many others, existence was a careful, quiet negotiation with scarcity, a life lived within the ripples of this constant, demanding military tide, always aware that the empire's voracious hunger inevitably came first. Beyond the constant, quiet pressure of the military's needs on your everyday existence, there was a far more terrifying intimation of its power. Imagine a stillness, perhaps a late afternoon, the air heavy and calm. Then, a subtle shift, a faint tremor carried on the wind, almost too quiet to name. You might dismiss it at first, a trick of the ear, but it persists, a low, distant thrumming that seems to vibrate in the very marrow of your bones, a feeling more than a distinct sound. Slowly, almost insidiously, this vibration would grow, coalescing into something more defined, more ominous. The rhythmic, deep-throated beat of Naker drums, those great kettle drums often carried on horseback or even camels, would begin to separate itself from the low rumble, pounding out a relentless, hypnotic pulse that spoke of organized fury, and interwoven with it, or perhaps swelling to consume it entirely, would be the sound of the earth itself protesting, a rolling thunder that wasn't from the sky, but from the hooves of tens, even hundreds of thousands of horses, a living avalanche sweeping across the steppe, or the plains, or the unfortunate cultivated fields that lay in their path. This sound, this symphony of approaching devastation, was not merely a signal of battle to come. For countless settlements, for entire cultures, it was the audible announcement of the end of their world as they knew it. It meant that the vast, relentless machinery of the Mongol Empire was turning its gaze, and its considerable force, directly towards you, towards your home. There would be no meaningful negotiation with this sound, no reasoning with the tide it heralded. It was the sound of upheaval on a scale difficult to comprehend, the chilling, drumming promise that everything was about to change irrevocably. That chilling, drumming promise has now arrived, not with a thunderous crash, but with the cold, efficient sorting of the conquered. If you're an outsider, someone whose origins are a mystery to these new masters, and, worse still, if you possess a strong back and capable hands, your immediate future becomes starkly, unpleasantly clear. There's no gentle inquiry, no negotiation for your skills. Your perceived usefulness is, in this moment, your greatest liability, a grim cosmic joke played out in the dust and chaos. Imagine the scene, the air thick with the grit kicked up by countless boots and hooves, the scent of sweat, nervous animals, and a lingering metallic tang you try not to identify as fear, or worse, blood. You might be herded with others, a silent, shuffling mass, before stern-faced warriors whose language is a guttural mystery. Their eyes appraise you not as a person but as a resource, a tool. Perhaps you'll be thrown into a labor gang, your days blurring into an exhausting rhythm of digging siege trenches under a relentless sun, the rough, splintered wood of a shovel handle becoming an unwelcome extension of your own aching arms. Or maybe hauling immense stones for siege engines, your muscles screaming, your throat perpetually parched, all to aid the very forces that shattered your world. But there was a grimmer fate, one whispered about in hushed, terrified tones amongst the captives. If the siege ahead was particularly stubborn, you might find yourself among the ***, the human levy, pushed to the very front lines, a reluctant, expendable shield against the desperate defense of a besieged town. Your body, not your labor, becomes the offering. The cries from the ramparts, the whir of arrows finding their mark all around you, the sickening thud of projectiles against flesh, these would be the last terrifying sensations. A truly awful way to contribute to empire building, wouldn't you agree? A short, brutal, and entirely involuntary career in the service of the Khan. Let's imagine the fighting is over. The dust, literal and metaphorical, begins to settle. What would you see? The landscape, once perhaps a bustling market town or a peaceful farming village, is now transformed. Smoke still curls from the remains of buildings, a dark plume against the vast, indifferent sky. The air is thick with the scent of ash, mingled with the earthy smell of livestock and the sharper, unsettling tang of fear. Then, the division. This wasn't a chaotic grabfest, not usually. The Mongols were organizers, even in destruction. Picture the scene. Methodical lines of soldiers, their faces impassive, perhaps stained with soot and effort. They stand guard as goods are piled high. Bolts of silk shimmering even in the grim light, precious metals glinting dully, sacks of grain, tools, anything of value. Herds of terrified sheep and cattle are driven into pens, their bewildered cries a mournful soundtrack to the proceedings. And then, the people, the survivors. They too are part of the spoils, treated with the same detached assessment as the livestock or the silks. You might see them, faces streaked with dust and tears, herded into groups, their pleas and cries eventually fading into the general murmur of the victors counting their gains. A child's lost shoe, a dropped prayer bead, small forgotten fragments of shattered lives. Scribes with ink and parchment would meticulously record the shares. Each warrior, each commander down to the lowest ranks, received their portion according to strict rules. A chillingly efficient process, turning human lives and cherished possessions into mere inventory. The vast, silent steppe has witnessed this countless times, a stark testament to the empire's relentless consuming hunger. And while the empire consumed lands and peoples on a grand scale, a far more intimate and perhaps more insidious, consumption threatened every single individual, every single day. This wasn't the clash of armies, but the silent, creeping invasion that began with the most trivial of wounds. Imagine, for a moment, you're going about your tasks, perhaps mending a leather strap or gathering firewood. A sharp stone, a splintered piece of wood, and you have a small cut on your hand. Annoying, perhaps, but hardly a cause for alarm in our modern understanding. But in the vast, often unsanitary expanses of the Mongol territories, that tiny breach in your skin was an open gateway. You might wash it if clean water was even available, and then try to forget it. But soon, a dull throb begins. The skin around the cut reddens, swells, feels hot to the touch. A few days pass, and the throb becomes a constant, burning pain. The wound might begin to weep a thick yellowish pus, carrying a faint, sickly sweet odor. There are no antibiotics here, no antiseptic wipes in a neat little packet. Perhaps a poultice of herbs, crushed and applied with a hopeful prayer, is the best you can manage. Yet the infection often had its own relentless agenda. The redness creeps further up your limb, like a dark tide. Fever sets in, leaving you shivering one moment, burning the next. Slowly, inexorably, the tissue might begin to die, turning a bruised, then blackened hue as gangrene takes hold. Or sepsis, that invisible poison, could flood your system, leading to a slow, agonizing decline. A simple scratch, a forgotten moment, blossoming into a fatal encounter, a stark reminder of how fragile life truly was, with no modern medicine to stand guard. And it wasn't just the dramatic wound that posed a threat. The very fabric of daily life, the simple act of existing, was woven with unseen perils, particularly when it came to what we now consider basic hygiene. Consider for a moment the water. To the Mongols, water was sacred, a precious lifeblood on the vast, often arid steppes. This reverence, however, meant that washing oneself, or even one's clothes, was an infrequent affair, almost a taboo, lest you pollute this vital element. So, imagine the layers of dust, sweat, and grime that would accumulate, a constant, gritty companion on your skin. Now, add to this the matter of waste disposal. In a largely nomadic society, the concept of sophisticated sanitation systems was, to put it mildly, rudimentary. Around a bustling gur camp, the ground itself would become impregnated with the refuse of daily life, animal dung, food scraps, and human waste. The air, especially on a still day, might hang heavy with a complex bouquet of smells, a far cry from the fresh breezes of the open steppe you might envision. This wasn't just an assault on the senses, it was an open invitation to disease. Dysentery, that wretched dehydrating illness, would have been a constant lurking shadow. Other waterborne and filth-related diseases, invisible armies in every unwashed hand or contaminated puddle, found fertile ground. Each sip from a communal vessel, each bite of food prepared in less than sterile conditions, became a small gamble, Surviving the harshness of the elements or the brutality of conflict was one thing. Surviving the microscopic enemies fostered by the very environment was quite another. A silent, daily battle waged within. So what happened when that inevitable illness, perhaps that relentless dysentery, or a raging fever, finally caught up with you on the vast, indifferent steppe? Your best, perhaps your only recourse, wouldn't be a physician with a neat little bag of gleaming instruments and reassuring scientific knowledge. Oh no. You'd be seeking out the camp's shaman, a figure who walked the line between the physical world and the often terrifying spirit realm. Imagine, if you will, being ushered into their gur. The circular tent, perhaps darker than usual, the air thick and heavy. The scent of burning juniper, or maybe pungent, unknown herbs, would prickle your nostrils, mingling with the smell of old felt and wood smoke. Light, filtering unevenly through the smoke hole above, might catch on the strange assortment of objects adorning the shaman's attire. Perhaps polished animal bones, brightly colored stones, scraps of metal that clinked softly with their every movement. They wouldn't be taking your temperature with a clinical device, or asking about your family history of ailments in any systematic way. Instead, the shaman, eyes perhaps distant or intensely focused, would begin a dialogue, not primarily with you, the sufferer, but with the unseen spirits. A low, rhythmic drumming might start. The vibrations felt deep in your chest, accompanied by guttural chants that rose and fell, filling the smoky confines of the tent. These sounds weren't for your comfort. They were tools for negotiation, pleas, or even commands, directed at the malevolent forces believed to be feasting on your vitality. Herbal remedies, mysterious concoctions brewed from plants whose secrets were known only to the shaman, might be pressed to your lips or applied to your skin. Their efficacy was a tapestry woven from generations of trial, error, and deeply held belief. And sometimes, just maybe, a touch of genuine, if accidental, medicinal property. There were no guarantees, no sterile assurances. Your recovery then became a fragile hope, balanced precariously on the shaman's ability to appease the invisible world, a world that felt intensely real when your own life hung in the balance. But even the most potent shamanistic rituals, the most heartfelt appeals to the spirits, often stood powerless against the invisible tides of sickness that ebbed and flowed through the yurts and across the vast windswept plains. These weren't always the dramatic, sweeping epidemics that history remembers vividly, but rather a constant, simmering presence of diseases like smallpox or typhus. They were woven into the very fabric of daily existence, an accepted if deeply dreaded risk of just being alive. Imagine, then, your own body, a vessel from a future of unimaginable medical marvels, suddenly thrust into this unforgiving environment. Your immune system, so adept at fending off the meticulously catalogued foes of your own time, would be like a naive traveler in a land of ancient, cunning predators. A slight fever might begin as a subtle, creeping warmth, easily dismissed in the chill of the steppe. But then, perhaps an angry, unfamiliar rash would bloom like a dark flower across your skin, or a deeper, more consuming heat would take hold, blurring the edges of the world and clouding your thoughts. There were no laboratories to whisper the name of your tormentor, no sterile clinics, certainly no miracle cures in a shaman's pouch for these pervasive microbial threats. The air itself, often thick with the acrid smoke of dung fires, the close breath of livestock, and the inescapable, organic sense of life lived in close quarters, carried countless unseen challenges. A seemingly innocent scratch from a thorn, a shared wooden cup at a communal meal, or the unnoticed bite of a louse or flea could be an open invitation. And then there was the ever-present shadow of plague, perhaps not always the full-blown pandemic you picture, but a lurking horror along the busy arteries of trade the Mongols forged. For such afflictions, there was no earthly defense, only a terrifying vulnerability and a chilling recognition that your modern knowledge of germs would be a lonely, isolating burden in a world seeking answers from the unseen. Beyond these ever-present threats to your own fleeting existence, let us turn our thoughts ever so gently to life's very beginning. Bringing a new child into the vast, often unforgiving expanse of the Mongol world was an event imbued with a profound and perilous intimacy. Imagine a dimly lit yurt, the air thick with the familiar scent of animal hides, dried herbs, and perhaps the faint, acrid smoke from the central fire. Here, there are no gleaming hospitals, no reassuring beeps of monitors. The attendants are likely elder women from your own encampment, their hands weathered by a lifetime of nomadic existence, their knowledge a rich tapestry woven from generations of experience, traditional remedies, and perhaps a quiet prayer whispered on the wind. Their care, though undoubtedly heartfelt, lacked the understanding of infection or the interventions that save so many today. For the mother, this passage was a tightrope walk over a chasm of uncertainty. Survival was a victory, not an expectation. And for the precious newborn, blinking against the soft glow of a butter lamp, the first fragile breath was just the prelude to a gauntlet of challenges. Many tiny lives, delicate as desert flowers, would not see their first winter, nor even their first few months, succumbing to fevers, infections, or simply the harshness of their environment, ailments we now dismiss with a simple visit to the doctor or a readily available medicine. Each small cough, each restless night, would be amplified by a deep, unspoken parental fear, a constant companion in a world where the joy of a new arrival was always tempered by the chilling reality of its potential brevity. The silence that followed a fading cry was a sound too often heard. Beyond these existential shadows cast over life itself, imagine navigating the simplest currents of your day. You awaken not to the familiar hum of your world, but to a cacophony of sounds, guttural and swift, words that hold no anchor in your mind. Thirst gnaws at you. Hunger soon follows. How do you ask? Your tongue feels thick, useless, the comforting familiarity of your own language, a distant, almost forgotten dream. You might point, perhaps mime drinking, your face a carefully constructed mask of pleading. You'd scan their eyes, the subtle set of their jaw, the almost imperceptible tilt of a head, desperately searching for a flicker of understanding. A smile could signify kindness, or perhaps its quiet amusement at your strange, silent dance. A stern look might mean dismissal, or it could be a grave warning. Each interaction becomes a gamble, a high-stakes game of charades, where the rules are utterly unknown, and the penalty for a wrong move could be far more severe than simple embarrassment. The air itself might seem to thrum with unspoken meanings, conversations flowing around you like a swift, deep river, while you remain stranded on its desolate bank. Every gesture you make, every clumsy attempt to bridge that vast linguistic chasm, feels awkward, exaggerated. Their responses, a complex tapestry of subtle shifts in expression, the flick of a wrist, the intonation of a sound that is mere noise to you, would be like trying to decipher a dense, ancient manuscript in a language you've never encountered. Vital information, perhaps a warning of imminent danger, an offer of crucial alliance, or a simple life-sustaining instruction, would likely wash over you, utterly lost in translation. This profound isolation, the constant, wearing inability to connect or comprehend, would be a silent weight upon your spirit, an unseen burden even before any physical threat materialized. Understanding that most basic human connection would be a locked door, its key forever out of reach. And even if, by some chance, your eyes fell upon the written word, a glimmer of hope for understanding in this vast, unfamiliar land, that hope would likely dim just as quickly. The elegant, vertical columns of the Mongol script, perhaps etched onto a wooden tablet or a piece of stretched hide, would appear as intricate, beautiful, yet utterly baffling patterns. Derived from the Uyghur script, it flowed downwards, each character a delicate dance of lines and curves, entirely alien to eyes accustomed to Latin, Cyrillic, or even Arabic forms. It might look like art, like decoration, but its meaning would remain stubbornly locked away. But even if you somehow possessed a magical key to decipher these strange symbols, you'd soon discover another layer to your predicament. Literacy, the simple act of reading and writing, was far from a common skill among the everyday people of the steppes. It was often the domain of officials, religious figures, or merchants involved in complex trades. Your average herder or warrior likely navigated their world through spoken word, tradition, and keen observation, not through scrolls or ledgers. So imagine holding a P*Paisa, one of those famed Mongol passports, a symbol of authority and safe passage. It might be beautifully crafted, perhaps in silver or iron, inscribed with those mysterious characters. To a Mongol official, it's a clear directive. To you, it's just a heavy, ornate object. Its vital message as silent and unyielding as the vast, indifferent landscape stretching out before you. Another door, firmly closed. Another layer of silence in a world you cannot read. The silence of that unreadable *Paisa is a profound one, isn't it? A small, cold weight in your hand, representing a world of meaning you simply cannot access. But this silence, this inability to connect through written words, extends far beyond official decrees. It seeps into the very fabric of daily life, into the transmission of everything that truly matters, everything that keeps a society breathing and coherent. Imagine, for a moment, the evening settling over a Mongol encampment. The air grows cool, carrying the scent of wood smoke from the dung fires, perhaps a hint of roasting meat or the sharp yeasty tang of arag, that fermented mare's milk bubbling gently in a skin bag. Inside a warm, felt-lined gur, or perhaps gathered under the vast, diamond-dusted sky. A storyteller's voice rises and falls. It's a rhythmic cadence, weaving tales of heroic ancestors, of cunning spirits, of the sacred laws of the steppe, and the lineage of the great Khans. Children listen, their faces lit by the flickering firelight, eyes wide, absorbing not just entertainment but their history, their moral compass, their very identity. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were living libraries, repositories of knowledge passed down through generations, vibrant and alive on the breath of the narrator. To you, however, this rich tapestry of sound, the lyrical flow of the epic poem, would be little more than an intriguing, yet ultimately baffling performance. The intonations, the dramatic pauses, the knowing glances, the shared laughter or solemn nods of the audience, all would be clues to a grand communal puzzle you lack the fundamental pieces to solve. Critical information, like which nomadic routes are safest in the coming season, which plants betray hidden water sources, or the subtle social cues that dictate respect and avoid deadly offense, would drift past you, unheard and unheeded. You'd be standing on the shore of a vast ocean of understanding, unable to even dip a toe in its vital, life-sustaining waters. And it's not just the spoken word that would betray you. Your very body language, the unconscious flick of a wrist or an innocent point of a finger, speaks a dangerous, alien dialect here. Imagine, for a moment, the vast, wind-swept steppes stretching out before you, under a sky so immense it feels like a physical presence. The air is crisp, carrying the faint, earthy scent of distant herds and crushed wild thyme. You spot a particularly ornate gur, its felt walls perhaps dyed with rich, earthy ochres, a thin ribbon of smoke curling lazily from its crown. Out of habit, a simple gesture of shared observation, you might raise a hand, perhaps extend a single finger to point it out. A completely harmless act in your world. But here, under the watchful eyes of the Mongol people, that casual gesture could be a spark in dry tinder. Pointing directly at individuals, or at the sacred snow-capped mountains that pierce the horizon, or even towards the solemn burial mounds of revered ancestors, was often seen as deeply disrespectful, a challenge, or worse, an invitation for ill fortune. The atmosphere around you, once just cool from the plains, would suddenly grow colder, the gazes of those nearby hardening, a silent, unnerving shift in the air. Or, consider the simple act of seeking shelter. You approach a gur, its rounded silhouette, a comforting shape against the endless land. The low doorway beckons. Unthinkingly, eager to escape the wind that whispers across the grasslands, your foot might brush against, or even land squarely upon, the wooden threshold as you enter. A catastrophic, unthinking mistake. The threshold was profoundly sacred, a spiritual boundary protecting the home's spirit and prosperity. To defile it, even in ignorance, was to grievously insult your hosts, to invite misfortune upon their household. These weren't minor social blunders. They were violations of *Yos, the unwritten customary law, the very fabric of their ordered world. And such vital threads, once snapped, were not easily mended. And even if, by some miracle, you navigated that treacherous doorway without offense, The true chilling silence would only just begin to settle in. Not the quiet of the vast steppe, but the profound, internal silence of utter incomprehension. Imagine yourself there, surrounded by the low murmur of voices, the clatter of unseen tools, the scent of unfamiliar cooking fires, yet understanding none of it. The words spoken around you, and perhaps directed at you, would be a flowing stream of guttural alien sounds, carrying no comfort, no instruction, no discernible warning. You might try to speak, to ask a simple question: where to find water, what that distant drumming signifies, or even just to offer a nervous, placating smile. But your own words would fall flat, thin and meaningless in the heavy air, perhaps even marking you as suspicious, or worse, an imbecile, to those who hear them. Their faces, weathered by wind and sun, etched with lines you cannot read, would remain impassive, or shift with expressions you couldn't possibly interpret. Is that flat gaze curiosity? Impatience? Annoyance? Simple, stark apathy? The not knowing would be a constant gnawing companion, a cold knot in your stomach. This isn't merely about the inconvenience of a language barrier. It's about the crushing weight of being unable to share a single human connection. To feel fear prickle your skin, a cold dread seeping into your bones, and have no way to articulate it, no one to offer even a fleeting glance of shared understanding. To feel hunger, or thirst, or a desperate aching loneliness, and be unable to seek solace or simple aid. You would be a ghost in their vibrant, earthy world, unseen in your true self, unheard in your most fundamental human needs. This profound, suffocating isolation, a constant, invisible pressure on the spirit, might prove the cruelest, most unbearable trial of all. And this deep, internal vulnerability would find its echo in the vast, unforgiving landscape around you. Out on the immense, rolling steppe, your solitude wouldn't just be a feeling, it would be a glaring, dangerous fact. Picture it: an endless ocean of grass, rippling under a sky so enormous, it seems to swallow the horizon. The wind whispers, a constant sighing companion, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant herds, but offering no comfort, no direction. You are a single conspicuous speck in this sparse, indifferent emptiness. Here, far from the relative safety of a guarded caravan or the smoky warmth of a village, your ignorance is a bright, alluring signal. You wouldn't recognize the almost imperceptible shift in the air that warns of approaching riders, nor the subtle tracks in the dust that speak of recent passage. The distant glint of sun on metal, the sudden, unnatural silence of the wildlife. These would be clues lost on you, vital whispers unheard. To those who read the steppe like an open book, you'd be an anomaly, an easy mark. Imagine, then, a few shadows detaching themselves from the gentle curve of a distant hill, moving with a practiced ease that speaks of familiarity with this harsh world. They wouldn't need to be the fearsome warriors of the Khan's armies. Just ordinary men, perhaps, made opportunistic by the unforgiving nature of their lives. Your unfamiliar clothes, your hesitant movements, your obvious lack of protectors, it all screams vulnerability. What little you possess might be all they need. There would be no grand battle, no dramatic confrontation, just a swift, brutal efficiency, perhaps, learned from the swiftness of the hunting falcon. Your small story, your unfamiliar face, would be absorbed by the immense landscape, leaving no trace. The wind would continue its ancient song across the grasses, the sun would beat down, and the vast silence of the steppe would reclaim its own, as if you were merely a fleeting dream, quickly forgotten in the harsh light of day. But even if human eyes didn't find you, the steppe itself held other watchers, ancient and patient. The immense, unbroken canvas of the plains, stretching further than your sight could ever reach, offered scant true shelter if you found yourself isolated. As dusk painted the vast sky in hues of bruised purple and fading orange, the character of the land began to shift, its daytime openness transforming into a landscape of shadowed hollows and whispering grasses, each rustle a potential secret or a warning. Imagine, if you will, the sun finally bleeding away, leaving the world in shades of deepening blue and then inky black. Perhaps you've strayed from the relative safety of the camp. The distant glow of its fire is now just a faint memory. The air grows colder, carrying scents you can't quite place. Damp earth, something wild, something undeniably hungry. Out here, the silence isn't truly silent. It's a tapestry woven with the rustle of unseen things in the tall grasses, the distant, mournful howl of a wolf pack beginning its nightly hunt, a sound that seems to vibrate right through your bones. Those aren't just shadows dancing at the edge of your limited vision, playing tricks on tired eyes. They could be the slinking forms of steppe wolves, their eyes glinting like chips of cold moonlight, or other predators equally adept in this domain. These weren't fairy tale creatures. They were very real, very efficient hunters, their instincts honed by millennia of survival in this harsh land. A moment's inattention, a stumble in the dark, the unwise decision to take a shortcut alone. These small choices could carry an immense final weight. There would be no dramatic standoff, just the swift, brutal efficiency of nature, indifferent to your plight. Yet, even if you somehow evaded the creatures of the night, other perils, far more subtle, lay in wait, woven into the very fabric of the steppe. These were the dangers of the unseen, the spiritual landscape that the Mongols navigated with such ingrained reverence. Imagine, wandering, perhaps a little lost, you come across a lonely pile of stones, an asterisk ovu with strips of weathered blue cloth tied to a nearby branch, fluttering like tired prayers in the ceaseless wind. It might seem like nothing to your modern eyes, perhaps a curious landmark. Or picture this. You find a pristine spring, its water a cool, clear temptation after a dusty journey. You cup your hands, disturbing its mirror-like surface to drink, a perfectly natural act. But in this world, such places were not merely geographical features. That cairn was a dwelling place for a powerful local spirit, that spring a sacred entity. To disturb them, even accidentally, was to risk not just the ire of the local community, whose faces might turn from impassive to cold suspicion in an instant, but also the wrath of the offended spirit. Suddenly, the wind might carry a different chill, the silence feel heavier, charged with an unspoken wrong. There might be no immediate, dramatic retribution, no lightning strike from a clear sky. Instead, it could be a creeping dread, a sense of being marked, watched. The locals might shun you, their hospitality evaporating like morning dew, convinced your unknowing transgression had brought misfortune or angered the spirits of the land. Your innocent mistake, born of ignorance, could paint you as a bringer of bad luck, a dangerous presence in a world governed by delicate balances you couldn't even perceive. And if you found yourself truly isolated, painted as a pariah by such an unseen offense, your vulnerability would become a stark, undeniable truth. Imagine, then, that creeping dread solidifying into something far more tangible. Perhaps it's not a spirit you've angered, but a passing Mongol patrol, eyes sharp for anyone who doesn't belong, anyone who seems adrift. Or maybe you're simply swept up in the aftermath of a local skirmish, a bewildered bystander in the wrong place at the utterly wrong time, your foreign face marking you as suspicious, or simply as potential loot. Suddenly, rough hands might seize you. There would be no negotiation, no polite inquiry into your intentions, just the cold reality of capture. One moment you are a free individual, however lost or scared. The next, you are property. Your protests, if you could even voice them in a language they understood, would be less than whispers in a gale. Your world shrinks abruptly to the sting of a rope burned on your wrists. The rough, unfamiliar fabric of a slave's simple tunic. The hollow ache of hunger gnawing at your belly. The air itself might feel different, thick with the dust kicked up by countless shuffling feet, the pungent scent of unwashed bodies packed close, and perhaps the sharp tang of animal dung from a nearby pen. Life as a slave in the vast, sprawling Mongol Empire was a landscape of brutal, unyielding hardship. You'd possess no rights, no voice, your very existence dictated by the whims of a master you likely couldn't even communicate with. Perhaps you'd be forced into grueling labor under a relentless sun, hauling heavy stones for some distant, new settlement, or tending vast herds of livestock across harsh, unforgiving terrain. Or maybe your fate would be domestic servitude, an endless, monotonous cycle of tasks within a smoky, crowded yurt, always under scrutiny, always expendable. Hope for freedom? That would be a fragile ember against an icy, relentless wind. A luxury few could even dare to dream of. Each sunrise would bring not promise, but the chilling certainty of another day spent in chains, seen or unseen. And beyond the crushing weight of forced servitude, beyond the gnawing hunger and the constant wearying fear, lay another, perhaps even more terrifying reality. Your very existence hung by the most slender of threads, a thread that could be snipped by the arbitrary whim of almost anyone with a sliver of authority, or even just a stronger arm. There was no grand system of justice for a captive like you, no recourse, no appeal. Imagine for a moment being dragged into the smoky circular space of a chieftain's yurt. The air is thick with the scent of burning dung, cured hides, and perhaps the sharp tang of *arag, the fermented mare's milk. He sits, a powerful figure swathed in furs, his face weathered like ancient rock. He might not even deign to look at you directly. A flick of his hand, a muttered word to a subordinate based on a fleeting suspicion, a passing annoyance, or simply because he can, and that would be it. Your quiet suffering, or your desperate hope, extinguished. Or picture a military commander, his leather armor creaking, his eyes hard from countless campaigns across the endless plains. He might deem you too weak for further labor, or perhaps he simply needs to make an example. No trial, no defense. Even a group of isolated herders, their faces squinting against the relentless sun and wind, could decide your unfamiliar presence was an ill omen, a disruption to their harsh, carefully balanced lives. Their verdict under the vast, indifferent sky would be just as final. Your life, a mere speck in their grand, sweeping world, could be erased without a second thought, a whisper in the wind. But even if, by some miracle, you evaded these immediate, brutal ends, a different kind of dissolution awaited, a quieter, more insidious unraveling. Picture this, as you settle deeper into your own comfort. You are utterly alone, adrift in a sea of unfamiliar faces, a world that makes no sense. The language spoken around you is a torrent of harsh, guttural sounds, like stones clattering in a dry riverbed, utterly incomprehensible. No friendly smile meets your gaze. No familiar word offers comfort. Every gesture is a potential misunderstanding. Every interaction fraught with the unknown. Imagine the crushing weight of this isolation, pressing down on you more heavily than the vast, indifferent sky. There's no one to share a fleeting memory with. No one who understands your fears or your quiet hopes. No one to even recognize the name you carry. The simplest pleasantry, a shared laugh over a common experience, is an impossible dream. You might try to communicate, your hands sketching desperate shapes in the air, your voice a mere whisper against the wind, but you'd likely be met with blank stares, or worse, suspicion. A flicker of impatience in their eyes could spell yet another danger. This profound disconnection, this severing from the very fabric of human society as you knew it, would begin to erode your sense of self. The vibrant tapestry of your past life, your relationships, your identity, would start to fade, thread by thread, under the relentless pressure of this silent, alien world. The sun might warm your skin, the wind might still caress your face, but inside, a deep, gnawing cold would settle in your soul. This psychological siege, this slow starvation of the spirit, would be as deadly as any Mongol blade, hollowing you out from within until there was little left to endure. And as that inner cold deepened, the outer world would offer little comfort, little solace. The vast, indifferent expanse of the steppe would stretch before you, and the immediate, primal needs of your body would soon drown out even the whispers of your fading spirit. Food, for instance. Where would you even begin, alone in this unfamiliar land? Your modern mind, so full of abstract knowledge, would be utterly blank when faced with identifying an edible root from a poisonous one, with no elder to guide your hand, no shared community pot to offer even a meager spoonful. The hunger wouldn't be a gentle reminder. It would be a hollow ache, a relentless gnawing that clouds your thoughts and weakens your limbs. Then there's water. You might stumble upon a stream, a puddle perhaps. But is it safe? The desperate thirst would urge you to drink, to cup the cool liquid in your hands. But without local knowledge, without anyone to point towards a clean spring, each sip could be a gamble. The clear, filtered water of your memories would seem an impossible luxury. And shelter? The winds on the steppe can be merciless, carrying a bite that seeps into your bones. You might try to huddle behind a rock or gather some brittle branches, but the night would bring a profound, penetrating cold, a loneliness amplified by the vast, silent darkness. Your body, unaccustomed and unprepared, would quickly begin to falter. The energy reserves would dwindle, the initial shivers giving way to a dull ache, then a dangerous numbness. Malnutrition wouldn't be a distant threat. It would be your constant, unwelcome companion, a silent countdown to your body simply giving up. And it's not just the biting cold, or the gnawing emptiness that has become your constant companion. Let's imagine a simple, unwelcome visitor, a common ailment, perhaps a tiny scratch, earned while gathering those brittle branches for a pitifully small fire, begins to throb with an insistent heat. In your world, a forgotten incident, easily mended. Here, though, that small break in the skin is an open door. You'd feel the skin around it tighten, see an angry red flush creep outwards like a hostile tide. There are no soothing creams, no sterile bandages, certainly no little pills to ward off infection. The very water you might use to clean it could be teeming with its own unseen threats. Or maybe it's something from within. A simple stomach bug, perhaps from water that wasn't quite boiled long enough, or a piece of dried meat that had seen better days. That initial familiar discomfort, that slight queasiness, soon blossoms into sharp, cramping pains that make you double over. A clammy sweat, cold and unsettling, breaks out on your brow, even as shivers rack your already weakened frame. Your body, stressed and starved of true nourishment, possesses so few reserves to mount any kind of defense. Each wave of sickness, each draining visit to the sparse, unsanitary latrine area, would pull you further into a deepening lethargy, a fog of illness from which there is no gentle, healing hand to pull you back. Modern medicine, with its quick fixes and comforting reassurances, is an unimaginable sorcery here, a fairy tale from a world you can no longer reach. And as the physical sickness leaves you hollowed out, a different kind of erosion begins, one that gnaws at the very edges of your sanity. A slow crumbling from within. The world outside your immediate suffering barely registers, yet its unseen pressures are immense. It's not always the overt terror, the flash of steel, or the roar of a raiding party that does the most damage. More often, it's the quiet dread that settles in the pit of your stomach like a cold stone, the constant, low hum of anxiety that becomes the inescapable soundtrack to your existence. Every unfamiliar face, etched with lines of hardship or cold authority, is a potential threat. Every guttural command, barked in a tongue you don't comprehend, a possible sentence you cannot appeal. You learn to shrink, to make yourself small, hoping to pass unnoticed. This unending stress, a tight knot in your chest that never quite loosens, is amplified by the gnawing emptiness of persistent hunger. The meager, often unpalatable rations, if you even receive any, do little to quiet the relentless ache. Your mind, already foggy from deprivation and illness, struggles to form coherent thoughts, beyond the immediate, desperate need for sustenance, for just a moment of safety, a single, unambiguous kindness. Around you, life thunders on with an indifferent energy, the clamor of camp, the strange cadences of an unknown language, the pervasive smell of wood smoke, horses, and unwashed bodies. You try to understand, to find some pattern in the chaos, but it's like trying to grasp smoke with trembling hands. This overwhelming incomprehension isolates you further, a tiny, bewildered speck adrift in a vast, uncaring human ocean, where the rules are unknown and the currents are fierce. It's this relentless barrage, the insidious fear, the grinding stress, the weakening hunger, the sheer alien nature of it all, that would truly begin to unravel you. Your mental resilience, that inner fortress we all believe we possess, would start to crumble, brick by slow, agonizing brick. How long could anyone endure, really, before the will to simply try? To even lift your head just fades away into the dust and the ceaseless, indifferent noise. And so, it happens. Not with a dramatic flourish, nor even a whimper that anyone pauses long enough to register amidst the daily clamor. One moment, there's the cacophony of the camp. The shouts in unfamiliar tongues, the endless steppe wind whistling through the felt yurts, the distant, mournful lowing of yaks. The next, for you, a profound, almost welcoming silence descends, as that last fragile spark of will finally, gently, gutters and extinguishes. Your body, now an empty vessel, lies where it falls, perhaps on the sun-baked, trampled earth beside a forgotten supply cart, its wooden wheels splintered and worn, or curled against the rough, oily felt of an unfamiliar yurt wall, already cooling beneath the indifferent gaze of the stars. No one calls out your name, for who here would know it? No one marks your passing, because in the grand, brutal arithmetic of empire building, your individual sum was simply too small to ever be counted. The sun climbs its arc, beats down with an unfiltered intensity, then dips below the horizon, painting the vast, empty sky in hues of fiery orange and bruised purple. The night air, crisp and carrying the scent of distant wood smoke and the subtle, earthy aroma of countless unseen lives, settles over you. Perhaps the coarse grass tickles your cheek, stirred by a breeze that carries no human voice of concern. Scavenging creatures, small and furtive at first, then bolder in the deepening darkness and the profound stillness, might approach with a hesitant, sniffing curiosity. The wind whispers through the sea of grass, a lonely, ancient lullaby for an unmourned end. You become just another shape in the sprawling landscape, slowly, inexorably, returning to the dust from which all things arise, and to which all things eventually return. Another unnamed, unrecorded soul, a tiny ripple that quickly vanishes, absorbed back into the immense, unforgiving, and utterly indifferent earth of the Mongol plains. And yet, this very same earth, so unforgiving to the uninitiated, was the cradle for a people of almost unimaginable resilience. This vast, often brutal landscape, which might swallow an unprepared soul whole, was for the Mongols not a desolate wasteland, but a living, breathing home. It was their stern teacher, their sometimes fickle provider, the very heart of their world. To not just survive here, but to forge an empire that would stretch across continents, required a level of hardiness that feels almost mythical to us now, a profound adaptation etched into their very being. Take a quiet moment, if you will, to consider what that truly meant. It was an existence woven from the sinew of the steppe itself, lived in deep communion with their animals, the sturdy horses that were extensions of their own bodies, the sheep and goats providing sustenance and warmth. Their days were a symphony of practiced skills. The effortless mastery of the horse, learned almost from infancy, the keen eye for game across immense distances, the intimate knowledge of every edible root and hidden water source. The wind, which to others might just be a chilling nuisance, carried vital messages for them. The subtle shift promising rain, the scent of distant pasture, or perhaps the faint comforting aroma of smoke from a friendly encampment miles away, a beacon in the emptiness. Their resourcefulness was born from necessity, honed to a fine art. The iconic Asterix Gur, their circular felt home, was a marvel of engineering, a warm, smoky haven against the biting cold, surprisingly airy in the brief, hot summers and always portable, moving with the rhythm of the herds and the ancient call of the seasons. Every part of an animal was used with reverence, nothing squandered. The rough comfort of wool and leather clothing, expertly stitched against the elements, the sharp, sustaining taste of air-dried meat and tangy fermented mare's milk, the ever-present, smoky scent clinging to everything. These were the textures, the tastes, the very smells of life. This wasn't just brute strength. It was a deep, ingrained wisdom, an almost spiritual attunement to the world around them, a testament to generations of adaptation, an incredible human story written on the wind-swept plains. And yet, for all this profound connection, this hard-won wisdom born of the steppes, life under the vast Mongol sky was a relentless, often brutal affair. The sheer physical endurance required, the constant vigilance against nature and rival clans, the stark realities of life and death played out daily. These are things so far removed from our cushioned existence. Imagine, if you will, the silence of your modern home, perhaps punctuated only by the soft hum of an unseen appliance, being replaced by the constant, mournful howl of the wind across an endless plain. This wind, carrying the scent of horses and wood smoke, but also the distant, unsettling sounds of a world perpetually on the move, and often teetering on the edge of conflict. And as our journey through this unforgiving past concludes, allow yourself to settle back into the safety and familiar comforts of your own time. Feel the gentle, even support beneath you, a world away from the unyielding cold earth that served as a bed for so many, night after uncertain night. Notice the quiet peace of your surroundings, the stillness, so different from the ever-present awareness of potential danger, a rustle in the grass, a distant shout. That was a constant, unwelcome companion for those who lived then. There are no sudden alarms here, no urgent calls to arms, only the gentle cadence of your own breathing. Appreciate just how different and how deeply perilous life once was. The struggles of the past, the sheer unyielding effort of survival can make our own soft landings feel all the more fortunate, a quiet, unearned luxury born from the relentless passage of centuries. Thank you for joining us on Plotfall. Until our next story, may your thoughts be calm and your rest deep.